You're listening to The Bounding Box, where we talk about web development, geo development, and everything in between. All right, man. So let's get started here. Let's dive
Yeah,
right in. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself? Tell us who you are, what you do, what you've been up to, and stuff.
great. Well, thanks for having me. My name is Silas Toms, and I'm a the director of data engineering now at Volta Charging, which is a funny path that I've ended up here because I kind of grew up wanting to be like running in the woods. Um, and even when I started on my like tech career with geography, I thought maybe it would be like collecting trail data using GPS or something. But I got into geography in college and realized that it added the like kind of like the why to what happened with history. Like geography explained a lot about like why people moved the way they did, or grew what they grew, or built how they built, or wore what they wore, um, because they were sort of constrained by the local geography,
Yeah.
which I found fascinating. So it just was a really cool and misunderstood, but also under understood um, discipline. So and then I found out that like especially during the economic downturn in '08, that there was a whole technical side that I could get into. And I had done like a little bit of programming in the past, but I just really dove into Python and combined it with GIS over the last 15 years to get where I'm at now. So it's been a long journey, but yeah, I really love the marriage of geography, technology, data, and analysis and visualization that modern GIS and data represents.
Well, that's awesome. When you were in school, did you was it mostly focused on physical geography or the human geography?
Well, it was a combination of both. There was a lot of physical geography in the, especially lower level stuff, and I took a pretty cool class on weather and
Yeah.
agriculture. But one of my favorites was one on the geography of China, where we really studied a lot about the physical geography. So we explained a lot about, where the rivers are, these giant rivers in China, how they've fed agriculture, the North China Plain, how like, some 400 million people or something, maybe more, live there, and utilize all the water uh, that rains down on China, throughout their rainy season, especially, and how the trade winds bring so much water to when across the Pacific, and when it hits China, it just dumps and creates, the rice growing regions in the
Hmm.
south, and then the more wheat regions in the north. That combined with some history classes I'd taken at Santa Cruz on China just blew my mind. Like it gave me a real understanding of why there's minority populations up in the mountains in the south, how the Han had like unified in the north and pushed south, why the rivers had kind of dominated their psyche, the Yellow to the Yangtze. It was just a huge combination of cultural, human, and physical geography that just gave me much more insight into how humans live, how they live, and why.
Oh, that's very cool. Yeah, when I was in school, we had our physical, like I said, we had the weather class, which is always fun.
Yeah,
But the courses I took were most focused on like human geography stuff. A lot of Marxist geography in school.
yeah, I
I
know.
was I
It
was all
really
like,
is.
man, this is pretty heavy. It was probably the professors, give it that,
Yeah,
but it definitely gave me a very interesting perspective
yeah.
and stuff at that time.
Well, some of my favorite courses in my master's, which I did here at San Francisco State University after finishing my bachelor's at Humboldt, was it was just focused on like how geography is something like you carry with you, especially talking about like when the Chinese were coming to San Francisco, to Chinatown, throughout the 1800s, especially. There was like a lot of assumptions that they carried disease with them, that
Hmm.
like, they were being, brutally utilized for labor, but kind of despised by the white poor. In my town up in Eureka, near where I grew up in Humboldt County, there's a famous incident where like they kicked all the Chinese residents out in like 1895. They put them on a boat down to San Francisco because there was a war between some Tongs, some gangs in the Chinatown of Eureka at the time, and the white laborers were very, already suspicious of
Oh
them.
wow.
So it's just like this, you can't escape, even though they'd come to America just looking for the same opportunity that everybody else had, right? Like they were unable to escape their geography because it was imprinted on them. So, like, that's a really interesting concept in some of those theoretical discussions that we had that go beyond like a map and like the concepts of what geography is just was really expanded for me through that idea of like economic justice. People are affected by where they live,
Hmm.
their air pollution. One thing that always stuck with me is like you can't put industry in single family home areas, but you can put homes in industrial areas.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, like when you look at things through that lens, it does lend itself towards um, there's like a cultural, I don't know, not fully Marxist all the time, but like a lot of socialism that runs through it, and just sort of an understanding of like people over here are suffering, because of this X number of factors, air pollution, floods,
Yep.
freeways dividing up their land, that kind of thing. Like,
Yeah, exactly. All the history that goes with how all that was formed and
yeah,
decision making put into place and stuff like that that kind of divides people up by their geography, right? Like,
yeah, yeah, exactly. Whether or not it's fully intentional, it always kind of lands pretty squarely on the backs of the poor and minorities,
mhm.
especially because they live in like flatter areas where freeways are probably easier to build and they have no political power. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? So it's
exactly.
like the combination of both ends up really screwing them over, especially in the 70s when they were building on these things. So when you look at it through a geography lens, it adds some understanding. It doesn't make it easier or better to see these stories,
It's interesting. If you look at some of the areas in LA, there are a couple of areas where there's unfinished freeways because
Oh, really?
those particular areas have become affluent over the years and have much more, like you said, political power and influence
Yeah.
over running a freeway through their neighborhoods.
Yeah. LA is a funny, like my dad tells me that when he started dating my mother, who grew up she was born in New York, but like grew up in Western LA. And he would look east and just see like layers and layers and layers of pollution over the city, looking towards the San Gabriels, which you could barely see at the time.
Yeah.
And it like they cleaned up a lot of it with the like extreme air pollution measures throughout the 70s. Thank God. But it's still affecting people. Like there's probably such high cancer rates, such high like I think more than anything, health depends on clean air, maybe clean water too, and good food. But like clean air is just something that you can't you can't escape the need for. And I've always wondered like how many cancers happened, or even like have you ever seen that theory about how leaded gasoline caused like an increase in crime
Oh wow, I
throughout
didn't
the
see
like,
that one.
yeah, it's pretty interesting if you Google that. Like
Oh, okay.
everywhere that there was like a lot of leaded gasoline, there was like an increase in violent crime. And as they phased it out in the 80s and 90s, the violent crime decreased at the same time. So,
Huh.
yeah.
Yeah, that's a really interesting one. I gotta look that one up. That's cool.
Yeah, right. So, like, yeah, what you're breathing in, what you're eating, what you're drinking, that's all going to affect your community, right? And your geography, it becomes you that way.
'Cause I remember as a kid we'd have those smog days where you couldn't they'd cancel PE because couldn't really go outside and they didn't want to risk the health and stuff.
Terrible.
But
Yeah. They have less and less, I suppose, now, huh?
I haven't heard of them. My kids never had them over here anymore, but
Yeah.
I remember being a kid and having to have that
Yeah.
pop up.
Yeah, I mean, LA was famous for it, and it was like almost a joke worldwide. Now, I guess maybe that's moved on to like, concerns about Beijing or,
Yeah.
parts of India are still suffering from stuff like that. But I always think like too, like you look back I always think of the movie Parenthood. Have you seen that movie?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. The grandpa in that is like 65 and he looks terrible. And people who are 65 now just look a little bit better. And I wonder a lot, like, did the Clean Air Act have something to do with that? Like,
I wouldn't be surprised at all because yeah, you
yeah,
look at some people today like the actors in like Cocoon, like those people, like
yeah,
they really aren't that old if you think about it now, right? Like I'm getting there. In the...
yeah. I know. Yeah, we both have a couple gray hairs, so we're thinking about getting that old, right? And I would be surprised if I feel like I've just wrinkled up that much that I need to go swim in a pool with a bunch of alien eggs.
Oh man. All right, so let's dive into your new book coming out. All right, it is
Yeah.
Python for ArcGIS Pro. All right,
Yeah, I know. It's great. This will be it's basically the third in a series. It's a new book. It's not using any older material, but it's in essence updating my ArcPy books, which I've really enjoyed writing. And the second edition, especially, which I wrote with Darrow Byrne, who's a good friend of mine, I went to grad school with. It covered a lot of great material on both ArcPy and ArcGIS Online, which was like really getting big. That was 4 years ago or so. And ArcGIS Pro was just getting started somewhere around there as well. But this one focuses a lot more on ArcGIS Pro, obviously, and the ArcGIS API for Python, as well as ArcPy, which is still, it's hard to tell exactly where the each stop, they kind of overlap a little bit, but more than anything, we try to show like, here's what you can do on the desktop, and here's what you can do to get data into the cloud and share it on your map. And
so
we even do one chapter, one case study where you create like a ArcGIS API for JavaScript web map as well with some data that you've processed in Python.
nice.
So yeah, like I've had a couple of my coworker Bill Parker, who's like been an environmental consultant for the last 10, 12 years, working on a lot of environmental quality SQL stuff. He does a whole bunch on like how to automate cartography because he had to make so many state reports. He had to
Yeah.
update all the time. ArcPy is a lifesaver, yeah, and the ArcGIS API is really cool. So I enjoyed this one. It's pretty in depth, and we tried to include stuff on a lot of raster data, and then even like getting into pandas and NumPy and a lot of notebook coverage.
So I guess that's a really cool thing with like the Python for ArcGIS API. I mean, you can you're not limited to just the using the ArcGIS modules with Python. You can mix and match whatever it is you
Yeah,
want to bring in, right? So
yeah. So for instance, that case study I mentioned, which is the last chapter, I worked with a master's student from Johns Hopkins, Joshua, who he had written up a pretty cool final paper, and we turned it into this case study. And in essence, it combines like the requests module, where he's like calling data from the World Bank on agricultural data for the last 40 years or something, and then he downloads it, processes it. He describes all this like and then uses a scikit-learn random forest classifier to classify the data. So you got the data science part, and then converts it into a service, an ArcGIS Online, using the ArcGIS module, and publishes it in a little web map using the ArcGIS API for JavaScript. So you go for like from the raw data on someone else's server to getting it on your server to processing it, classifying it, and then viewing it all in one 40-page chapter or whatever. It's some real cool stuff, I think. And the ability, yeah, like just like you're saying, to bring in the request module, all these open source scikit modules, to use notebooks to do some pandas work. It's cool. And like that's the best part about the Python ecosystem, I think.
Yeah, I think for people that are like coming into GIS, maybe have had a couple years under the belt or so, and they're looking to move from like GIS tech to GIS analyst, getting into Python and just data processing like that is probably the next step for them, to move on to that analyst spot that
Yeah.
they're looking at, right?
Or data engineering,
Yeah,
which is
yeah,
where
that
I'm
one
at
too.
now. And so, for instance, like as a data engineer, we use things like Airflow, which have you used Airflow at all?
No, I haven't used that one.
Yeah, so it's a Apache project called Apache Airflow, donated by Airbnb, I believe.
Oh, sweet.
And it's in essence a self-contained software package that you can deploy to schedule your scripts to
Huh.
move data. So as a data engineer, it's perfect. We're like writing all these scripts to pull data from an API or from another part of our organization that needs to be updated constantly. We have a couple of software as a service applications that we support that need to have the data updated on some schedule. So that allows us to just write the script, say, here's when we want it to run. And then we can log in through a web browser and see that it ran and, see all the steps that executed correctly. It's freaking awesome. I really like the ability to just manage scripts in like a professional and, clean way. It brings scripting up to the level of like, just you, it feels very professional. Let's put it that way.
It's much better than writing a bunch of cron jobs and crossing your
Yeah,
fingers, right?
yeah. It's I mean, cron jobs are cool, but they're headless in the sense that like you have to dig in to figure out exactly what you've scheduled, and there's one like, did it run? Yeah, there's other ways, obviously, but it's just like nice to have that front end. Um, and it takes you like creating pipelines, creating consistent pipelines that people rely on. That takes you from like the tinkerer to the professional engineer in essence.
Yeah.
That's kind of the dividing line, if there is one. I mean, I didn't feel any different when I got the title data engineer.
Yeah, exactly. Right. I mean, you're still working, you're still doing the work that you want to do and stuff, but just like you got a new title, a little bit more responsibility.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah. I've got a great team too that I'm leading now. Way smarter than me, which is I think the way you want to do it. Like you want to hire people who can like we're now instituting continuous integration, continuous delivery, a whole new architecture for our database. And like I just help brainstorm and think of things and set the motivations and bring the overall plan from up on high down to my team, but they're the ones who are just like, oh yeah, here's what we're going to do. Da, 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 da. Yes, so glad I hired you.
I think that's like the key part, right? You always want to work with people that are smarter than you, people that you
Oh
that
yeah,
help lift each other up and stuff like that, and
yeah,
look forward to get the job done, which is always nice.
yeah. I agree. You learn constantly that way, and the work gets done fast, and you all look good. It's being on the group project with the smart kid in class.
I want to say I can't remember exactly, but I want to say that ArcMap originally shipped with just VBA. Like I think a lot of desktop products
Yeah.
just had VBA at the time, right?
Uh-huh.
Like, and it wasn't until like an 8 point something release that it might have gotten Python in there, like an
Yeah.
early ArcPy
And it was
module.
ArcGIS scripting back
That's
in
right. That's what it was.
07. And I used a little ArcGIS scripting. It was limited. It didn't have as much cartographic control, but it did do some data stuff that was very cool. And then when they switched to calling it ArcPy, and they introduced like the data access module and some of the spatial access stuff as well. I loved it. Yeah, because I was doing a whole lot of processing of data for the high-speed rail project, which may or may
Mm.
never be built. Again, this was 12 years ago at this
Oh
point.
yeah.
And basically we would get, new potential routes drawn as CAD products from engineers. I was an environmental consultant. So what we would do is we would take those CAD products, convert it into shape files, and then analyze it against a host of protected resources, everything from, streams to protected architecture to farmland to species range. and calculate the effects of each different potential route. It was, manually, it was like a 4-day process,
Yeah.
right? But when I got there at the environmental consulting firm, I was like, I think I can automate this. And I did with ArcPy. It took I don't know, a month to figure it out. And then it was down to an hour. And we like had it spitting out, a spreadsheet that would say like, this is the exact amount of acreage of each of these protected resources that were affected. And that's when I was like, yes, this is the stuff.
Yeah, and that's always important because that time, I don't know if a lot of people realize, but like the time to prepare like reports like that and stuff like that is dollars out there. And when you're working with like public agencies and stuff like
Yeah.
that, it's like a very valuable resource, right? So these
Oh, God.
reports that would take maybe a week or so at a time,
Yeah.
if you can deliver them like in a day, like people
Yeah.
are loving it, especially these engineers that need to get quick turnaround, get feedback from probably someone in office somewhere, city council type stuff, right? So
Yeah. And if it's a consistent report that you're going to have to produce over and over, why not script it?
yeah,
And then, ArcPy even improved beyond that phase, and they started adding a lot of cartographic control that made it really easy to output a bunch of maps. You create like an MXD template, and you just send in, this new updated data, zoom the box to it, and you create really beautiful maps automatically.
yeah.
With some constraints. I think there's still a few things, but Bill Parker goes into like the tips and tricks on that. I think will really help people, because having both the data automated to the point where you're outputting a spreadsheet and then having a stack of PDF maps outputted next to it all in one flow is pretty amazing.
It's great. I think the first time I really took advantage of it is we had every year we had to send like black and white PDFs to the newspaper for areas that are getting annexed into the sewer district for LA
Oh,
County,
wow.
right? And like it was just a tedious thing I didn't want to do.
Yeah.
So I figured out how to get ArcPy to do it for me. And bam, done like in an hour.
Yeah. One of my initial projects as an intern back in, I think this is '08, I was working for a city, and we were attaching like scanned construction drawings to features in a web map. It was actually like a web map guide. What am I thinking of? It's like
Huh.
one of what is the name of their tool? Map guide. It's like map guide, something like open source tool. There's a version of a CAD product, an AutoCAD product, and in essence, like these engineers at the city wanted to be able to click on a street and see all the different construction projects over the last 100 years that had happened, reviewing the documents. So I had to like take 30 different single drawings, merge them together, and then attach them to the correct street. And I realized I could write a script called using what's PyPDF, some open source tool that just merged them all together. And I like basically almost automated myself out of a job. It happened so fast. And I was just like, oh, but my boss was loving it. And he recommended me for my next job, and, on and on. But I still feel like that discovery, that feeling was just so exciting. Like, wait a minute, if I just write this, 20-line script, it will do these hours of work for me. And I don't think I've gotten over that ever.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, what else you want to tell people about like Python or what's in your book,
Mhm.
for example, right? Any
Yeah. Well, there's like an intro to Python if you don't feel comfortable yet. There's lots of resources online, obviously, there's classes and stuff, but I do think that it helps to have a review. And then we try to go really in depth. This is, it's a big book, so it's going to cover, everything from, like we just talked about, with a lot of data analysis and spatial analysis, up through the cartography. And then I did spend some time writing about pandas and how to like
oh,
utilize
sweet.
pandas to do data analysis, which is really cool. I think you use it a lot, right?
Yeah, I've used that quite a bit before. It's been a
Yeah.
while. I don't have to do too much Python these days, but
Oh, nice.
in the times I have, it's been quite helpful to me.
Yeah. My world has opened up to where I do a lot of web maps too. So there's a
Hmm.
lot of JavaScript, which took me I'd say a good year to get comfortable with all the brackets everywhere
True, true.
because it's just so much cleaner in Python. And then, but once I got over that, I love it. So like the ability to, instead of creating a printed map that is like one zoom level and that's it, like you have to control for so many different kinds of zoom levels, how the data will act when you click on it, what pop-ups are going to do, your colors.
Hmm.
There's 3D now, like
All right.
yeah, just I love that. So yeah, to be able to go from raw data to this incredible visual with a combination of Python and JavaScript, I think is just super cool.
And I will say this for Python because I've done it in both. Is that testing in Python is just so much nicer to do than it is with JavaScript. Just
Yeah,
I don't care what anyone says. That's a hill I'll die on today. It's just
yeah,
it's just a better experience overall.
mhm. Yeah, and we're also using things internally like Fast API, which is like really improving. It's an asynchronous servers, so
Okay.
like it kind of catches up to some of the Node stuff that I also really like about JavaScript. I don't do as much server side stuff, but I do think that like Python web capabilities are, a lot of people use them, but they're kind of maligned in some ways. Like they're solid, but not spectacular, but they seem to be improving.
Yeah, like I think the first time I saw like notebooks, like Jupyter notebooks and stuff like that
Yeah.
with Python stuff, like I had never seen it before. Somebody introduced it to me, and I was like, "Are you kidding me? Like I can just start scripting stuff out and watch the results as I go by. That's amazing."
Especially for maps, right?
Yeah,
Because like
right.
seeing your map right there or your graph right there, right below your code, and you don't have to go back and forth between three different screens. And
Like, I think people that are like learning and they see notebooks of today, like just don't quite get how amazing it is to be able to do that. Like it's just great.
yeah, I know. Like I guess I'm deep in the data science world, so it feels normal to me now. But I think you're right. I think we forget how amazing just that coding environment is because it's so immediate.
Yeah, right. That immediate feedback that you get, you're able to see right away that a part of the code may not work, and you fix that, and bam, everything just runs in a sequence as expected. And like, wow, okay, great, I have a result now.
Yeah, I know. It's both really cool and just like a great learning tool, but it's the standard basically for most data science now.
Yep.
So um, I think like we have to get data scientists even more used to, you know, publishing scripts and services and algorithms and getting off of notebooks in some ways, but they're so convenient. I have a hard time arguing against them.
Oh, nice, man, nice. All right, so
Yeah.
because
So, what have you been working on lately? What kind of projects and services and such?
I mean, so I am very deep in the JavaScript API, and a lot of what I do has to like deal with like building apps and helping people optimize their app building and workflows and
Yeah.
stuff. A couple of projects I'm working on this year, which hopefully I can get out by the end of the year. I can't really talk about it yet, but I'm
Awesome.
hoping that they'll that will people will benefit from them, right? I'm hoping to make things a little bit easier for people to build apps and integrate maps everywhere and get that
Yeah.
out there. So that's my next goal for
Yeah.
this year.
I was just on one of the Mapbox designers was doing like a AMA today, and I asked him a question about like, what do you think is next for web mapping? Because I honestly think as cool as it is now, I think there's a lot more we can do with it. So what do you think's next with web mapping? And like, where do you want to see it go?
Man, that's a tough one, right? I mean, I think we've got 3D in the web, and I think that's growing. Um,
It's cool. It's cool as heck. Yeah.
yeah, exactly, right. And I think the visualization is still coming up, right? I think we're
Yeah.
starting to get to the point on the web that you can do stuff in desktop in terms of
Yeah.
visualization, right? Like this whole almost Photoshop like of effects you can do in the web. I think that's coming really close at this point, and I think that's growing. Um, and I just think integration like everywhere, right? Like people are just going to have like be able to integrate not just maps but map data. I think it's a big one,
Yeah.
right? So you may not care about seeing a map, but you might want to pull stuff out of a map, whether it's layers or tables or whatever someone's
Uh-huh.
linked to a map, and then start processing that data somehow and get a result out, whether it's charts or just tables or
Yeah.
who knows what kind of visualization would do. I think it's going
Yeah.
to be cool.
I know. Like I keep thinking about tables where you can set a field that says like, give me all of X within a distance
Yeah.
of this point, and it like populates that field. Like that doesn't have to be a map, but enabling that in the browser or even in a spreadsheet, like is just it's a combination of worlds that it's about time, and I'm really glad to see that it's possible now. And like it's very normal in some ways, and people expect it. So, but I do agree with you that like the 3D, utilizing that correctly is going to be a really powerful tool for the next wave of visualization. The growth in like the ability to take advantage of the client computer and
Yep.
have more interesting graphics means that we can do more and more cool things like on-screen visuals of mobility, people moving around during the day. Like for Volta, we work a lot with, we're a charging company, like EV charging stations. So we're trying to figure out like how people move around during the day.
Yeah.
And being able to visualize that is just so helpful to our decision makers to be able to think like, oh yeah, I see it, instead of just being like numbers on a chart or having numbers on a spreadsheet.
Exactly. I think decision making is a huge driving force, I think, in all of this that we do, right? At the end of the day, it comes down to someone needs to make a call based on something they see in a chart in a map or whatever it is, whether you're in emergency services or you work in utilities or, anything like that. So
Yeah.
it's a huge deal.
Yeah. I've worked in a lot of like traditional geo fields, real estate, now the auto industry. One thing that was really cool was like building visualizations of LiDAR data, or as to help cars figure out what a bicyclist looks like, right? So like the combination of AI and visuals and data is has been a really fun thing over the last few years, and I think that will continue to be important. In fact, I don't know if it's just where I've been hanging out because I just moved over to Oakland in the Bay here, right? But like when I go into the city, I see so many Waymo cars these days, like so many, and it might just be the street I'm on or something, but I saw like 15 yesterday. A bunch of them were charging at like
Oh,
an
wow.
EVgo station, but I don't know what's going on. They must be like just collecting so much data,
Oh, yeah.
so much.
And that's
So
where it is when you look at those companies like that, right? I mean, it's the
yeah,
data that they're collecting. The same like with Tesla, right? I mean, it's about the data that they're collecting when you drive your car around. That's like
yeah,
the bread and butter is going to be in that information down the road. So,
yeah, yeah. It's the storage alone. It's just got to be insane. The offloading, and then yeah, I saw a Zoox or whatever ZooX. I don't know.
oh, okay. I don't think I've seen that one.
Another company drive by the other way. So it's just the last
Oh,
24
wow.
hours, I've seen at least 15 different data mobility. There's got to be more data about San Francisco and its map than any city in the history of the world.
Oh, I'm sure there is. Wow. Before we go, why don't you throw me out a tip or something like that for anyone listening that wants to get into Python or just a GIS tip in general, if you want.
Yeah, well, I like your idea about adopting notebooks as like a coding interface. That's really friendly. But you just get interested, figure out what makes you like, maps in the world, and think about how you can display something interesting to you on a map using data. Like once you find a little passion in it, it makes it really easy to get technical. Otherwise, it can just be a little boring. But figure out what your favorite like walking your pub crawl is, and make that.
Awesome, awesome. Thanks, Seth. I appreciate that.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to the Bounding Box today. Please subscribe for more content.